Ukraine says it carried out large-scale drone attacks on multiple air bases, including some thousands of miles inside Russia.
This is a really audacious attack which has been carried out by Ukraine's.
It is one of the most daring and devastating Ukrainian attacks on Russian troops.
We will defend ourselves by every means available to us, available to Ukraine, available to Ukrainians.
5 Russian air bases, scattered across 5 time zones, were struck in a single, coordinated operation. Precision strikes crippled military assets and exposed vulnerabilities deep within Russian territory. This was not just another drone raid. The operation relied on trucks, AI-guided targeting systems, and quadcopters smuggled undetected into the Russian heartland. The codename was Operation Spiderweb, and its impact is still reverberating across military circles worldwide. But behind the headlines, one target stood out: a secretive Russian base, hidden in the forests, whose destruction would have consequences far beyond the immediate battlefield. The hidden base, Russia's strategic stronghold. Within Russia's remote northwestern forests, a military installation drew the attention of intelligence analysts worldwide. Unlike the high-profile bases regularly featured in state media, this site was designed for concealment. Satellite imagery showed it surrounded by dense woodland, with limited access roads and minimal visible infrastructure. Over the years, its true function remained unclear to outsiders, but recent commercial satellite photos began to reveal its significance. Analysis of these images, including those published by Business Insider, documented a surge in construction activity at the site. New runways appeared to extend further into the forest, while reinforced hangars and expanded storage facilities emerged. Fueling stations and logistical areas grew in size, all pointing to a deliberate effort to modernize the base. This pattern matched a broader trend: Russia's ongoing investment in upgrading military infrastructure, especially at locations tied to its long-range bomber fleet. Open-source intelligence consistently identified the presence of Tu-95 and Tu-22M3 bombers at this site. These aircraft, central to Russia's strategic air power, were routinely observed operating from the base. Their deployment here was no accident. The location placed them beyond the reach of Ukrainian missile systems, providing a secure staging ground for missions targeting distant theaters, whether in Europe or the Pacific. The site's remoteness, combined with its upgraded facilities, made it a critical node in Russia's ability to project force. Satellite assessments and statements from local authorities confirmed that the base was not left undefended. It was protected by layered radar networks and surface-to-air missile systems, forming an electronic and physical shield against aerial threats. These defenses, standard for high-value military assets, were designed to repel or intercept incoming attacks before they could reach their targets. The base's isolation further reduced the risk of surprise assaults from conventional ground or air forces. While speculation once surrounded the possibility of nuclear storage or advanced drone operations at the facility, available evidence pointed most clearly to its role as a bomber staging area. The observed expansion of hangars and logistical support structures aligned with the requirements of housing and maintaining strategic bombers. This focus on supporting long-range aviation operations rather than other unverified functions underscored the site's importance within Russia's military strategy. The destruction of such a base carried immediate and long-term consequences. Its loss would disrupt the operational tempo of Russia's bomber fleet, complicate the logistics of fueling and arming sorties, and diminish the country's capacity to threaten targets far beyond its borders. For military planners, the psychological blow was as significant as the material damage. The attack demonstrated that even Russia's most protected assets were vulnerable. Penetrating the defenses of a site like this required more than conventional firepower. The attackers needed to evade radar, neutralize electronic countermeasures, and deliver precision strikes deep inside hostile territory. The challenge was immense, and the risks, both operational and political, were substantial. Yet the operation succeeded, sending shockwaves through military and intelligence communities. Unraveling how such a protected site fell to attackers means examining the precise tactics of Operation Spiderweb. Operation Spiderweb, the covert strike. In June 2025, Ukraine's security service, SBU, orchestrated a covert operation that marked a turning point in the conflict. Simultaneous drone strikes on 5 Russian air bases, each located in a different time zone. This campaign, codenamed Operation Spiderweb, was not a random act of sabotage. It was a carefully coordinated assault, targeting critical nodes of Russia's long-range bomber fleet and exposing weaknesses deep within Russian territory. The operation relied on the OSA, or WASP, quadcopter, a small Ukrainian-designed drone whose compact profile enabled it to evade detection. The OSA's AI-powered targeting system was programmed to identify and strike at the most vulnerable points of military aircraft, such as exposed fuel tanks. Unlike larger, more conspicuous drones, the OSA blended into the environment and operated without reliance on satellite navigation, making it resistant to Russian jamming efforts. The result was a weapon that prioritized stealth and precision over brute force. Transporting these drones across the vast expanse of Russia required a strategy built on deception. Drones were hidden under the roofs of ordinary-looking wooden cabins on trucks driven by unsuspecting locals. These trucks, indistinguishable from civilian vehicles, traveled hundreds of kilometers across Russia's interior. Near their assigned targets, drivers were instructed to park and leave the vehicles. Remote controls then raised the roofs and the drones launched, bypassing layers of Russian security and radar networks. This approach allowed the SBU to position their assets within striking distance of fortified air bases without alerting Russian defenses. Olenya Air Base, south of Murmansk, became the focal point of the operation's success. The base, a vital hub for Russia's strategic bombers, was struck by a series of explosions. According to satellite imagery and independent assessments, at least 4 Tu-95 MS bombers and 1 An-12 transport plane were destroyed. The strikes targeted parked aircraft and aviation fuel tanks, causing secondary explosions and rendering the base temporarily inoperable. Local authorities responded by sealing off Olenogorsk, underscoring the severity of the attack. The impact extended beyond the immediate destruction. The attack demonstrated that even the most remote and heavily defended bases were within reach. Not every strike unfolded as planned. At Ukrainka Air Base in the Russian Far East, the operation failed when one truck carrying drones caught fire and exploded en route, aborting the launch. For years, Russia had maintained an image of invulnerability within its own borders, particularly at installations considered beyond the reach of enemy action. The simultaneous strikes on 5 major airbases shattered this perception. The operation revealed gaps in Russia's logistical and security systems, forcing a reassessment of vulnerabilities and prompting a response at the highest levels of command. Operation Spiderweb's success was not simply a matter of technological superiority. It reflected a shift in modern warfare, where adaptability, deception, and the exploitation of enemy blind spots can yield results out of scale with the resources committed. The operation's planning and execution sent a clear message about the changing face of conflict and the potential for smaller actors to disrupt even the most fortified adversaries. But how do we know these strikes truly crippled Russia's bombers? The next chapter is all in the images. Exposing the damage. Satellite evidence. Maxar satellite photos and OSINT analysts revealed the aftermath of Operation Spiderweb with a clarity that left little to interpretation. Commercial satellite imagery, released in the days following the strikes, documented the transformation of Russia's key air bases. What had been orderly rows of strategic bombers and ground support vehicles became fields of charred metal and scorched pavement. The evidence was not only visual but forensic. Each image captured the deliberate targeting and destruction of Russia's long-range aviation assets. At Olenya Air Base, the impact was unmistakable. Rows of Tu-95 MS bombers, once neatly parked on the tarmac, were reduced to blackened hulls. Thermal imagery captured by satellites showed still-hot craters where fuel tanks and engines had been hit, underlining the precision of the strikes. OSINT groups, using high-resolution commercial photos, confirmed the destruction of 4 Tu-95 bombers at Olenia alone. The BBC and Reuters corroborated these findings, noting that the targeted bombers were among the most valuable assets in Russia's arsenal. These losses were not limited to Olenia. Similar patterns of destruction were observed at other bases struck during Operation Spiderweb, including Belaya, where commercial imagery confirmed 3 destroyed Tu-95s and 4 Tu-22M3s. Each site showed evidence of carefully selected impact points, with aircraft and support equipment clustered around blast zones. The role of OSINT analysts was crucial in piecing together the full scale of the operation. By cross-referencing satellite photos, base layouts, and the sequence of explosions, they reconstructed the timeline and effectiveness of the strikes. Publicly available imagery revealed not only destroyed aircraft, but also the remains of fuel depots, maintenance facilities, and logistical infrastructure, all essential to keeping the bomber fleet operational. The deliberate placement of each strike indicated a clear intent: to cripple both the bombers themselves and the systems that sustained them. Financial Times analysts estimated the strikes wiped out about 20% of Russia's long-range bomber fleet, aircraft Russia cannot replace since Tu-95 and Tu-22M3 production ended with the Soviet collapse. This loss carried long-term implications for Russia's strategic posture. The Tu-series bombers, central to Russia's ability to launch cruise missile strikes across vast distances, became irreplaceable casualties. With no manufacturing infrastructure to build new aircraft of this type, Russia faced a deficit that could persist for decades. Debris analysis from the satellite imagery provided further evidence of the strike's effectiveness. Close examination showed fragmented fuselages and scattered components lying adjacent to impact craters. The proximity of these remains to targeted zones confirmed direct hits rather than incidental damage. The pattern of destruction, engines, wings, and fuel systems obliterated, suggested an operation guided by precise intelligence. Military experts noted that the attackers had likely identified the most vulnerable and operationally significant targets in advance, maximizing the impact of each drone. The strategic consequences of the strikes quickly became apparent. The Wall Street Journal and the Moscow Times reported that Russia responded by dispersing its surviving bomber fleet across a wider network of air bases. This move, intended to reduce vulnerability to future attacks, introduced new logistical challenges. Maintenance crews and support infrastructure were stretched thin, and the ability to coordinate large-scale missions was diminished. The dispersal of aircraft complicated Russia's operational planning and reduced the fleet's readiness for rapid deployment. More broadly, the strikes exposed a critical vulnerability in Russia's air defense posture. The Institute for the Study of War assessed that the damage imposed temporary constraints on Russia's capacity to launch long-range missile and drone attacks into Ukraine. With a significant portion of its bomber fleet out of action and support systems damaged, Russia's ability to project power was directly affected. The operation forced Russian planners to confront the threat posed by low-cost precision-guided drones, an adaptation that would require both time and resources to address. With these images, the scale of Spiderweb's blow comes into focus. Next, we examine what this means for the future of the war. Operation Spiderweb demonstrated that the future of warfare is shaped by intelligence and adaptability, not just firepower. By deploying AI-driven drones with precise targeting capabilities, Ukraine inflicted heavy losses on Russia's strategic bomber fleet and forced a rapid dispersal of aircraft across dozens of bases. This dispersal complicated Russia's ability to coordinate and mass long-range strikes, undermining a key pillar of its military doctrine. As low-cost drones breach even the most fortified strategic arsenals and command centers, both sides must adapt or risk obsolescence. If you found this analysis insightful, like and subscribe for in-depth coverage of tomorrow's conflicts.